Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jason Fox here, and I wanted to share with you my new book, The Anointment. And I just wanted to take you inside the book a little bit and show you what's in it. Here we have the ladder, Jacob's ladder, which is a spiritual ladder of 613 rungs. Here we have a diagram of the four forces of physics: gravity, which binds the solar system; electromagnetism, which binds atoms; we have strong nuclear, which binds the nucleus of atoms; and weak nuclear, which is the deterioration of the nucleus of atoms. And now we also have the four forces of spiritics, which parallels the four forces of physics. This was a discovery made in spiritics, the four forces of spiritics, and they parallel these four forces. And the four forces are altruism, selflessness, selfishness, and egoism. Here we have a larger diagram of the four forces of spiritics. Altruism is concern for others. Selflessness is no concern for self. Egoism is concern for self. And selfishness is no concern for others. Okay, guys, so I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the four forces of spiritics. And so here's a zoom in of the first force of altruism. Now, altruism is a force of attraction and reception. It's a force of attraction into the soul, and there's 248 fillings that fulfill the soul. And these are 248 altruistic acts that fulfill the soul. Here we have selflessness. Selflessness is also fulfills the soul, but it's a force of repulsion. It's a force of repulsion from the ego. It goes down to the ego and you say, no, I'm not going to be egoistic. And you block the ego from fulfillment, and then it goes up and receives into the soul. So it's a force of reception and attraction into the soul, but it's a force of repulsion from the ego. And there's 365 restraints of selflessness. Okay, guys, so here we have a diagram of the two parts of the soul. There's the positive part and the negative part. As mentioned in the previous section, the positive part is the 248 altruistic fulfillments that go into the soul and fulfill the soul. And the negative part is the 365 negative fulfillments that are rejected from the ego and they go into the soul, fulfilling the soul. So once you have 248 positive fulfillments with 365 negative fulfillments, then you become in adhesion with God and with 613 integrations, while 248 positive integrations and 365 negative disintegrations, becoming a complete whole integer. So in spiritics, it was discovered that there are three levels, major levels of life, and here's a diagram of the ladder. And here you have the positive laws, 248 positive laws, and the 365 negative laws, creating the 613 laws. And so here we have the first level of life, which is below the ladder, which is also called the animalistic life, or animality, where you have egoism and selfishness. Then you ascend up a little bit further up the ladder, and this is called the human level, humanity, when you become part altruistic and part egoistic. And this is the second level of life, and what you're doing is basically you're trading selfishness for altruism. And the third level of life is the angel. You go from animality to humanity to the angel level. And when you go up to the angel level, you trade egoism for selflessness. So you become altruistic and selfless. Now, these are the three main levels of life: animal level, human level, and the angel level, which was discovered in Spiritics as well. Here is a diagram of Jacob's ladder, and it's referenced in the Bible in Genesis 28:12, and it reads, "And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven." And it's Genesis 28:12. Now, this diagram is a ladder, and the sword represents positive actions, and the shield represents negative restraints. According to Arthurian legend and the Matter of Britain, where, the legend of King Arthur, when the sword and the stone, it's as if we have metaphorical swords, 248 swords, and 365 shields stuck in stone, and they're inanimate, and we're unable to perform the actions and uphold the restraints. So we have to remove these swords, 248 swords, and the 365 shields from the stone, so that we can use the swords and the shields. The sword is an attack of altruism, and the shield is a block, is a protection, a block of restraint. Here's the evolution of desires. Every one of us generally goes through this evolution throughout our life. Here in the very beginning are basic, desires that we share with animals, like, sex, hunger, thirst, sleep, wakefulness, family. And then as we fulfill these desires, our desire grows, and our desire grows into a greater accumulation of these desires, which is money and wealth, which is a greater accumulation. It's a larger desire. Once it's fulfilled, then we develop even higher intellectual desires, such as power, fame, honor, respect, prestige. And then, so the desire grows even larger, and the fulfillment's even larger. And once that's fulfilled, then we desire even more, which is knowledge. Knowledge is a great amount of power, and it's an even greater desire and a greater filling. But once we are no longer satisfied with knowledge, then we are done desiring the physical world, and then we desire the spiritual world, of understanding and wisdom, of the 613 desires of altruism and selflessness. And that's the evolution of our desires. Here is the yin yang of Chinese philosophy and the religion of Taoism. And the yang represents the positive and the male, and the yin represents the negative and the female. The male in the Bible is a code word for action, and the female is a code word for restraint. So in the Bible, there's actually 248 yangs and 365 yings. 248 positive actions and 365 negative restraints. This is just a basic general lineage of biblical lineage, dating back from the first man, which is Adam, from 4000 BC to Noah, 3900 BC to Abraham, 1948 BC to Moses, 1393 BC, and to David, 1040 BC. This is the 5 different types of inputs or sensory inputs. This right here is a picture of a desire with a filling, and that's without the sixth sense. So without the sixth sense, we're basically we receive the 5 senses without the sixth sense only perceiving 1% of the totality of reality. But once we develop the sixth sense, and then we decode the 5 senses, the stimuli from the 5 senses, then we can perceive the other 99% of reality. Now here, there's basically 5 different kinds of, there's 5 senses, but there's 5 different kinds of reception. There's audition, vision, gustation, olfaction, somatosensation. Basically, audition is hearing, vision is seeing, gustation is tasting, olfaction is smelling, and somatosensation is feeling. And so you hear sound, you see light, you taste flavors, you smell scents, and you feel heat or pressure. Here's a diagram of confession and restitution. In the beginning, man or woman and God are in adhesion with one another. They're bonded. But then as life progresses, sometimes men or women commit sin and separate from God. And this distance from man or woman to God is called sin. The distance is called sin. And then, so in order to, one way of becoming closer to God is to confess, force of confession. And then after confession, you have to make restitution. And then once you make restitution, you come closer to God and closer to God. And then eventually you restore complete adhesion and bond with God completely and are total unified one with God. This is the law of unity. As I previously mentioned, in the beginning, God and man or woman are distant from each other, and that distance is called sin. And once we bond with God, that closeness is called virtue. But first, it's gradual process. As you learn the 613 mitzvahs, or 613 qualities, you grow closer to God. So you start distant, come closer, and then you become equivalent in form, same, bonded, unified with God. And this similarity of form or bonding is called virtue. The distance is called sin. So here's a diagram of joy and pleasure. Pleasure is on the left and joy is on the right. A lot of people think it's the same thing, but pleasure is really a fleeting, transient, transitory, short type of fulfillment. I mean, it has a high peak, as you can see, but it goes very high, but it low crashes, and the time is very short. With joy, it's not as much of a high, but it's enjoyable, and it's much longer felt, and there's no crash, and that's the difference between, it's a longer lasting, it's unbounded, and it's not fleeting like pleasure.